too is it's so funny. So this morning, we're at the gym, and sometimes the guys from the academy they bring the big speaker down to their dressing room, and then they won't bring it up. They just like leave it down there. So in the morning I'll get there and there's no speaker in the gym. So I have to I message in that group chat, I'm like, can somebody please bring up the speaker? And I'm walking back through the class today, like which is kind of the way they have to walk. And this one kid that always does everything exactly who I would expect to bring up the speaker is the one who brings up the speaker. So he brings it up and he's walking in and I say to him, I'm like, oh yeah, I was like, nobody else could grab the speaker today, eh? And he goes, no, they were all just arguing about who should bring up the speaker. So he just grabbed the speaker and brought it up, and that leaves a mark. It leaves a mark. And this is kind of starts to tail into what I wanted to talk about because again with tryouts and evaluations and people trying to make teams and all this, going to camps, leaving an impression, however you want to take kind of what we're talking about. There's details to the game, whether it's on the ice, off the ice, whether it's during your shift or between shifts, on the bench, after you score, whatever. There are details that important people actually pay attention to. And one thing that this is gonna stick with me for the rest of my life in hockey now is talking to one of the head scouts for an NHL team about two players that we had. And he was talking about one of them in particular, and he said the kid's details are just so good. And that's the first time I'd ever heard someone say it like that with those terms. The details are so good. And that's the perfect way to describe this player that he was talking about. It's not a lot of flash. It's not a lot of that kind of, it's not flash is one way of saying it, but even like that, just that buzz, that constant buzz when they play, he wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy. But he always got the job done in the smallest of ways. And I remember one play with this particular kid I'm talking about. He was in the neutral, and this is something people don't notice, right? He's in the neutral zone. There was a turnover that he didn't create, but the puck ended up kind of dribbling over to him. So he stopped his feet. It was right between the blue line and the red line. Stopped his feet. Puck was on his stick, and he made a 3-foot sauce pass over a guy's stick to his buddy that was breaking with speed in the neutral zone. And it wasn't a pass that would make you go like, holy, like what a pass.
No,
it's just like
play.
a little smart play. But look at everything he did that got that play. He tracked to where he needed to be. He stopped his feet to make sure he could get that puck. And then he executed a difficult play in a small area to make sure that the transition kept going. That player, he never would have thought all of those things, but he just does. He just does those things. And that's what, when we talk about these little things that people notice, the details that people notice, it's things like that. And the reason I think it's important to talk about for, parents, players listening, going into tryouts is if you have a coach that is worth their salt, or they know anything worth their salt, or they know, or they know about hockey, these are the things they key in on. Because the obvious is the obvious. Can you pass, skate, shoot? Like that stuff is obvious, stick handle, all that stuff. But it's those extra things, it's those little in between plays. I was just talking with Kyle Macker. Kyle, he doesn't like that his name's Kyle. He told me the other day.
I wouldn't like it either.
I called him Kyle on the podcast, and he's like, "What do you call me Kyle for?" It's Mac. Just call me Mac. So anyways, I was talking to Mac, and he's looking at video of some guys that are potentially coming as international players. And so he sent me because he's right into the details.
He loves a video.
Oh, so he sent me a paragraph on each of these kids using shitty video from wherever they're from in their minor hockey loops, trying to evaluate these kids. And everything he says has to do with details. Everything he says has to do with, yes, okay, can they skate? After we get past that, do they know how to support pucks? Do they know how to support pucks on the D side, right? Do they know where to go? Do they have any sense of where to be? Do they finish hits? Do they finish plays? How's their competitiveness? And these are all things that are not your basic skill set. So if you don't know hockey or you're not used to that, for parents, for players, it's important that you start to get used to that, start to think about it, because as tryouts come up, camps and all this stuff, these things are what come into play more than the basics, because the foundations, everyone should be there, So then what do you have on top of that is kind of, I guess, my point, right?
Yeah, I was doing a drill this morning with the two groups. It was a simple... it was simple. A simple enough drill. So basically, the details of the drill were, You'd start in a corner, climb up a wall skating, and hook and get a pass. The next point of that was to get a shot off quick with your feet moving inside the dot lanes. After the shot, come back around, climb up the wall with a cutback, get inside the dot lanes. So how do you get inside the dot lanes? You have to move your feet. So get inside the dot lane. So like little details were get high enough so that you're in a good shooting spot, whatever. The next one was to stop in front of the net for a tip. And the next detail was hard to the dot so you can get a shot off quick. So the point is, so as the kids were doing the drill, you could see the habits that were not there. And one of the habits was just, I mean, listening exactly what the drill was, first of all, which, okay, that's fine. But it was, number one was to have your feet moving. And there's so many times when kids think that they're moving, but they're not, or they just choose not to. So that was one I had to correct. And then it was getting to the dot lanes hard. And so when I explained the drill to them, I said, like, when we're doing drills like this, it's not about doing a drill. It's about finding what in the drill applies to a game or what purpose it serves, right? So there's a couple, I don't have to go through the details of what the purpose was there. But I told them, I said, like, the part that you're not doing well is the part that actually matters. It's when you're going to shoot or coming out of a turn, it's important that you have some separation speed. Doesn't mean you're taking, well, obviously, if you're in a small area, you can't skate for very long, but it's important that your feet move for 2-3 steps, one or two at least, to separate yourself, right? Number two is stopping at the net and coming back. The reason I wanted you to come back to the dot real hard is to teach you to get into open space quickly, to find things. So to your point, it's not about skating. It's not about all your skill level. So what I said to them was, you could be the most skilled guy in the world. Maybe I'm exaggerating. You could be very, very skilled. But if you can't get to spots where you're going to be able to use your skill, then your skill is kind of useless, right? So you could have a great shot, but if you're not willing to work and fight off a body or work to find 4 feet of ice to get the shot off, and you don't get past it because you're always covered, well, then your skill is useless, right? And if you're wondering why some guys can score goals around the net, like Zach Hyman, for example, for Edmonton, he was never supposed to be a 50-goal scorer. He was barely supposed to make the NHL. But he worked on things every year, and he's so good at getting in front of the net. But it's like not getting in front of the net. It's getting in front of the net and then doing it intelligently and working hard, finding the little details to find himself open. So I think they're saying like a high percentage of his 50-some goals this year and every year are within 7 feet of the net. That's a skill.
That's crazy, man.
That's a skill, but that's a hard work skill.
Yeah.
And it's an intelligence thing, but it's details, right? So the point is that if you copied his game, would you be able to score those goals? Like, well, you'd have to be willing to do the work. So that's what we're talking about, the little details. It's like, it's not about necessarily being a great skater. Great skating is good, but if you cannot execute it, if you always skate yourself into a corner, that doesn't really mean anything. If you're trying to do it in an individual effort all the time, it doesn't really mean anything. And you could be a really good hitter, but if you can't read a game or put yourself in a situation where you can check someone, then it's useless, right? Yeah. And stick handling in a phone booth is only so good some of the times. It's good, but it's not the whole game. It's the little things that make all the difference in the world in making an identity for yourself and having success.